the folks who went to Southport High School, you explain to us how you started high school in the first grade? Katherine, you're up.
Okay, I'll have to go first. I went there in the first grade. It was grades 1 through 12, and it was special. And I was so excited because after the sixth grade, the junior high was upstairs, and you really had. It was very special to be up there with the high school students. And unfortunately, that year the school burned, so my dreams went up in smoke. But Mike was we were in a 7th and 8th grade combination that year. And Annie Francis was our homeroom teacher and our Glee Club director. And after Southport High School burned, then we integrated with Brunswick Training School, and it became Brunswick County Southport High School. I think that was the name of it before South Brunswick was open. When I was in Girl Scouts, Mary Tomlinson, Joan Bomer, Libby Walton, and I left the Methodist Church, which is where we had our meetings. And Southport High School was directly in front. And Annie Weeks, who was Mike's aunt, I believe, is that right, Mike?
That's right.
She was our 4th grade teacher. I think Mike was in my 4th and 5th grade combination. But we looked outside, and the only 2 cars we saw at the school were Miss Annie Weeks' car and Miss Lingle's car. And we were scared of Miss Lingle, and we were being the Nancy Drew girls. So we walked across the street, and you could climb up on the side of the building and look in the classroom, and Miss Weeks wasn't there. And the coat closet was directly behind the classroom, and it had a window as well. And her pocketbook and her coat were there. And we just knew that Miss Lingle had hurt her in some manner. So we ran around to the cafeteria and got Miss Maisie Willis and Miss Mamie St. George to open the door for us so we could run down the hall and scream for Miss Weeks. We were scared something had happened to her. And here comes Miss Lingle with a broom. And she chased us down the hall. We ran in the girls' bathroom and hid up on the toilets with the door shut. And finally she left. Well, we just knew. We went back through the cafeteria. We beat on the door for Miss Maisie to let us back out. We knew the next day we were going to go to the principal's office and get a paddling, because that's what Miss Lingle would have sent us to. So Libby was so upset about it, she couldn't even go to school the next day. But we got back to school, and Miss Weeks smiled at us and hugged us and told us that she was very appreciative that we loved her so much. So it was embarrassing and funny at the same time.
Yeah.
Mike Royal, what's your explanation of that whole period?
Okay, going to school at Southport High School is a wonderful memory. Like Katherine said, I was always fascinated by the high school kids upstairs. And you know, you're in elementary school, we were all downstairs, and you always kind of dreamed of that day you could go upstairs, you know. Other than being sent upstairs on a few errands, you know, it was like foreign territory, very unique. And I really enjoyed it. And you know, like I've mentioned before, my first grade teacher was Miss Norman, and that she was also my mother's first grade teacher. And you know, so there was a lot of history and a lot of things that got passed on from year to year. And then of course, you know, we did get to go upstairs in junior high, but it was kind of a brief encounter because the school burned in January of 1969. And, you know, we all probably have memories of going down there. I stood across the street between the Methodist Church and the Masonic Hall, watching the firefighters try to fight the blaze, hearing shotgun blasts go off where a member was trying to keep the windows from blowing out onto the firemen. He was going ahead and pre-shooting out the windows, and it was really a kind of a traumatic experience. And then after that, they had to decide what to do with us. And, you know, we went to the Baptist church. There were some small classroom buildings that weren't connected to the school. Some of us were in there. Some went over to the Baptist Assembly to go to school. And then they finally settled it by the next year, I guess, which was the school year of 1970, where Brunswick County Training School was able to accept all the Southport High School students over there. Southport High School also was very proud with their sports. They seemed to have a lot of basketball championships and things like that. So
This is for people that grew up in Southport.
they played 8-man football, or maybe it was 9-man football. I can't remember now, but it was not a full football team because they didn't have enough. They didn't have enough going out for the football team to have 11 players.
Okay, of school, I went to Southport High School when I started school too, but I can tell you, I was not excited like Katherine and Mike were. I did not want to go to school. Miss Mary Ellen Watts was my teacher, and since I was the youngest of the family of cousins and my brother, I was the youngest, and they all let me know that when I went to school, I was gonna, Miss Norma was gonna straighten me out, and that she would be spanking me, and I would be a different child. So I did not want to go. So my mother said it was probably about 8 or 12 weeks. Every morning when she took me to school, I cried. I cried until I threw up every morning. And my brother, who was now 13, had the job of taking me to the door. And he would take me to the door and tell me, okay, now go in, quit crying, and you need to stay here. Well, I would scream and cry and follow him down the hall, screaming his name. So I know he was mortified, but that was how I was in the first grade. But after a while, I decided I would like it. And after that, it was good. Miss Norma always said that I was the only child. And by the way, she taught Mike and his mom. She taught my dad as well. She said I was the only child she had ever had that she thought could make it in Hollywood, because at that time they didn't have the term drama queen, but I think that's what she meant about me. But even as an adult, I would see her and she'd say, oh, here comes Mary Ellen. You're the only child I ever thought could make it in Hollywood, because you sure put on a show when you would come to my classroom in the first grade. So I went through the years at Southport, and then when I was a freshman is when the school burned. And like Mike said, all of the town stood around while that school burned and watched it, and it was very emotional. I was a freshman in high school, and the rest of the year, the high school took classes at the Baptist church in Southport. And then the next year we were combined, and that's where I finished school there. I'm going off on another tangent, because we went to a lot of basketball games and football games, mainly basketball. But I remember also for Donnie, his school growing up, when I was real young, they had a band, and when they would practice in the afternoon, a lot of the townspeople would go and sit and park and wait for that marching band to come by to listen to them play. So I can remember even before I was in school, my mother would put me and my brother and my cousins in the car, and we would go somewhere and park and wait for the band to come by so we could watch them practice. Because they were a marching band, and it was pretty exciting for me. And I guess that's all I have.
Thank you.
And I never skipped school, Bob, so don't ask that.
Okay, Donnie, you went to BCT. Was BCT also first grade through 12th grade?
Yes, it was. Now you got to remember one thing. In 1960. School year, they changed the name from BCT to BCH, Brunswick County High School.
So what was it like being in elementary school with all those big kids around you?
Well, it was sort of like Southport High. Southport High had upstairs. We were on the southern end of the school, and the kids, the high school kids, was on the northern end. We were on the southern end. They were on the northern end. But the thing that struck fear in most elementary students was Miss Estelle Swain. Had nothing to do with high schoolers. We could handle a high schooler. Miss Estelle Swain was the one. She was a third grade teacher, and what happened? 15 of us, including Judy Gordon, were sent to the third grade classroom because the second grade was so large that year. And after we saw how she did those third graders, we decided, at least 10 of us, that we were not going back in another year. So that's why we were able to skip the second grade right to the fourth. 1 year from Miss Estelle Swain, that was enough. Named Charles Drew that we hung out together. And they also played football. The baseball and football for a while was played on the highway. Growing up at BCT, I started, I actually went 11 years because I got lucky. I missed the second grade, but I ran into the third grade, Miss Estelle Swain, a teacher. Bob, you wouldn't have had to put up that Pledge of Allegiance because if you didn't know it, she would give you a good tanning. So I know the Pledge of Allegiance front and back. Some of my other teachers were, let's see, one that Miss Annie Francis. She was one of my favorite teachers. And then there was Anthony Davis in high school. And